Okay, ladies and gentlemen, fellow real estate professionals and real estate technology nerds alike, welcome to another episode of the Tech 4 podcast. It's so good having all of you joining us here today. And today we are live from Sweetwater's Coffee and Tea here in Scottsdale, a local regular spot for myself and Mr. Tech. And
good
today
stuff.
We are talking about what is going on in the real estate industry, who in the world does what, and how X, Y, and Z comes together. So without further ado, Jeff, would you like to take it away?
Yeah, I appreciate it. So once again, welcome everybody to this episode. And we do a full class on this of who does what rules are provided by whom, and people just don't want to either know or they want to bury their head in the sand, and then they get on the Santa Claus bad boy list and the bad girl list. And the problem is that it's not just a matter of not getting a present, they get fined. And we're not talking about small fines here, everybody. We're talking about $500 fines and $1,000 and $4,000 and up to $15,000, or
Who screwed up so bad that they got a $15,000 fine?
Yeah, you would be surprised. I need to be wary about what I say because I'm privy to some information that I'm not allowed to say, but I will tell you about the rules that people do get in trouble for. And there are some serious fines out there because we take security seriously, lockbox, people loaning out the lockbox. So here's the thing, right? I do this quiz in the class, and what's kind of interesting about it is in the quiz, I literally say who does what with the dues that we pay. And I have to tell you, this is actually kind of interesting, Jake. Honestly, out of the last, 100 classes that I've done with this, I have not had, are you ready for this one? One person get them all right. One.
Seriously?
None.
Wow.
None. Not even one person.
I think I've only done that quiz a handful of times in classes that I've taught, and I think out of those times, probably 2 out of 3 times, the people that I had in my classes didn't even bother trying to take a guess as to who does what and who provides us
Correct.
with what benefits.
Correct.
Now, this does kind of bring up an interesting question, actually, is when it comes to these different benefits that were provided and who does what, the question that comes to my head is it a matter of people just don't care to know who provides what, they're just not bothered to try and figure it out, or
yes, on that.
I get that, or is it just the fact that we as agents haven't been educated enough? Is there something that gets missed out on in the Code of Ethics, pre-licensing, and CE?
Yeah, yes, on that one as well.
Okay, so just give me your full thoughts and opinions. Like, what's your rundown? What do you think is missing, and where do we get it wrong to where we don't know who does what?
Yeah. So, needless to say, everything is about education, and the problem is that we just don't want to educate ourselves with learning about these rules. And the other thing is you have to wonder, like, who is doing this and where are we getting this education? So in pre-licensing, the 90 hours that we take, they go over the different entities. I think I did mine 25 years ago. But
they do, but it's very vague.
Right? They don't talk about, well, these rules are with this entity and these rules. And so I think that's the issue. And then I don't see a lot of classes out there that talk about, like, this is who does what and what entity takes care of it. And I just don't see it. But although we do see it when ADRE comes out with their fine structure and who got busted. And keep in mind that the Arizona Department of Real Estate does not hold back. They actually put who it is, their license number, what they got wrong, which is a little bit different from the other entities out there.
Like the Realtor Association.
Correct. Plus
your brokerage as well.
So they actually don't disclose that. That's one of the major differences, is that so ARMLS and whatever MLS you belong to across the state, we happen to belong to.
Or even across the U.S.
Or across the U.S., that's right. They don't disclose the name, so it's all confidential, which I actually have an issue with that. And I actually brought it up once because I was on the board, and I'm like, this needs to be public information because people need to know, not necessarily to shame them, although that is a big factor, but
They wear the cone of shame.
and believe me, that's actually huge, right? I mean, just to be shamed in your community, to say, oh my gosh, you actually did this, and you know what it comes down to is that is confidential information. So is breaking the code of ethics. You do that, you'll be, you know, you'll go in with the stat of being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but there's no names mentioned, which I disagree with that, but that's how it is.
Okay. So, kind of diving into this a little bit more, I think the greatest confusion that we have, especially here in Arizona, I mean, I can see it all across the U.S., especially, like, I've been to California. I know their rules are kind of a mess out there. But we're talking about here in Arizona, right? You've got rules coming in from legislature, you've got the Arizona Administrative Code, the Arizona Revised Statutes, plus you have substantive policy statements coming from the ADRE, stuff that's buried in places that you don't even know how to find.
Correct.
Plus then you've got stuff coming in from the NAR, the Arizona Association of Realtors, your local Realtor Association, then you get to your brokerage and their policies and procedures manual. Like, let's break this down one tier at a time, and we can start wherever you want to, but I think the general public kind of needs to know what does what and where do these different rules come from.
So let's first talk about it. So I have this beautiful, basically who does what from top to bottom sheet. Now,
the pecking order. The
pecking order is what I call it. And basically what it does is it talks about from everybody, meaning a licensee, all the way down, of course, to a realtor. Not that we're lower than that, but because we abide by a higher set of standards. But I just want to let you know, let's talk about this. So we do have the ARS, the Arizona Revised Statutes, right? So this is for everybody, and this controls, well, literally every law in the land of Arizona. And so regardless of whether you're a licensee or other. So these are major things. Talks about wholesalers, talks about the taxes that just went away from this year from rentals, right? So these are major things here. And then right underneath this are going to be, as you mentioned, the AAC, the Arizona Administrative Code, also known as the AAC once again. And what happens is that we have something called Title IV. So we got the Arizona Administrative Code, we got ARS at the top, we have AAC right beneath that, and then within the AAC we have the what's called the Title IV, not the Title IV, but Title IV, and it goes over all of the professions here in Arizona. So this is where it talks about hairstylists, doctors, nurses, different professions out there. One of them is going to be us as a real estate licensee. That chapter happens to be chapter 28, which, regardless of where you take your classes, I'm sure in about every class you take, you've heard R4 28 something, something, something. And that R4 stands for Title IV, chapter 28, hence the R4 28. And then, of course, within there, what page, what article we're talking about.
Get all these different subsections going on.
Correct.
Which, by the way, guys, just to let you know, when we're talking about R428, when we're looking for all of our rules and regulations for putting together CE classes and licensing and all that, that stuff lives in there. You're looking for your advertising requirements. That's in R428, the whole 500 subsection. 502 more specifically. And even more so, I think Jeff will preach onto this quite a bit, the 1100 section, specifically 1101, gives us our standards that we have as real estate professionals, which, by the way, are very, very similar to the standards that we get from the Code of Ethics, because I was told, you can probably back this up, that when these rules were put together and these standards that were put together for Arizona licensing, when they were put together, they were cloned from the Realtor Code of Ethics at the time.
Yeah, you know what, I don't know how true it is. I kind of made up that story, kind of. I need to see how true that is.
You're the one that told me that story.
I'm the one that told you. But back in 1957, I think it was 1957, 1958, when the Arizona Department of Real Estate was formed, you know what, I mean, okay, I might have fibbed a little bit and what, but I think they had to come up with something, and I do believe that somewhere along the line it had to have come from the code of ethics because they're so similar.
Yeah.
I mean, like half of them, if not more, are similar, almost to the point where it's creepy identical to it. And so that's why I truly believe that it did come from that.
Well, and at the end of the day, what's the NAR going to do about a government entity stealing their code of ethics? Are they going to file a complaint or something?
Right.
Yeah, good luck with that one.
Yeah.
Have fun.
So that's where I think it came from. So I just want to remind you that as a licensee, let's forget being a Realtor member, right? As a licensee, you have to, at a minimum, obey by the ARS, right, the Arizona Revised Statutes, and then the Arizona Administrative Code, all 34 pages, including, I don't want to call it the most important ones, but I think ones that are super important are going to be in advertising rules under R428-502, and then under your duties to your clients, R428-1101, right?
Okay.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And those are, at the very least, the most referenced areas for a real estate licensee, because not everybody's going to go in there and like, oh, what are the requirements for a CE class? No, most people just kind of show up and take their CE. Anyways, back to you.
Okay, so I want to remind you that if you break one of the codes, I don't know if I should call it a code or not, but one of the articles in the Arizona Administrative Code, AAC R428.
Shall we say one of the guidelines?
Yeah, there we go. I like that. What happens is that those, a little bit different from the SPSs that you were talking about, the standard the standard policy.
Yeah, substantive policy statements.
Substantive policy statements that the commissioner set. These are statutes, so in other words, you have to abide by them, or you're going to be in, for a lack of better words, deep doo-doo, right? Okay.
And by the way, guys, just to clarify what an SPS is, the substantive policy statement, basically what this is it is a statement that whatever current real estate commissioner is in office, it's a statement that they release as basically their interpretation of a statute or a law. So if there's something that some way, somehow has a hole punched in it that needs additional clarity, or that current commissioner feels needs additional clarity, they'll release a substantive policy statement. And generally speaking, it doesn't override the rule, but what it does is it aims to provide additional needed clarity to that rule.
Correct. So our current commissioner, Susan Nicholson, who's been in there, we're on year 2. Wait, is it year 2 now? Yeah, because the governor got in there. Wow, okay.
That went by quick.
That's right. Wow, that went by super quick. Okay, so our current commissioner, what happens that if you get in trouble by one of the rules of the R4 rules, then basically they're going to go ahead and look at it, and when they look at it, then they're going to go ahead and determine whether they want to fine you or not. Sometimes they'll just put a letter in your file and slap you on the wrist, and other times they will go ahead and fine you. And like I said, if you ever look, they don't have it as much anymore. Before, we used to have a quarterly report from the commissioner called the Bulletin. And you know what? The first thing I would do, I'm not going to lie, I would go to the obituary the disciplinary section, and we would see who got busted. And so when we would see it, once again, they do not hold back. They put in the full name of it, the license number, the brokerage that they belong to, what was the offense, and then basically how much they got fined, or if they had to take more classes, or if they even pulled their license. So that's the other thing that they could have done.
Okay, gotcha. And this isn't something that the commissioner really releases anymore at this point. At least his bulletin doesn't come out on a regular basis.
That's something that the current commissioner decided to do. And you can go on the website, and they have the late breaking bulletins. I haven't seen a lot come out lately, but you can go on, and sometimes at the bottom it will say, hey, by the way, and these are bulletins that I've seen that really are just for the people who basically have lost their license, right? Have their license pulled. Like, I don't see the minor infractions like I used to, but I do see the major things that some of these people do.
Do you think maybe as perhaps the current commissioner is not quite as concerned with the minor infractions, or she's just not worried about publishing them to the general public?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say she's probably worried about this. I think like everything else. I just don't think that they probably have the staff to go ahead and publish this out there. But I do think in the background, hoping that they are definitely punishing these people who are breaking the rules.
Yeah. Well, and by the same token, I would imagine, I know they stopped doing the newsletter, but I would imagine if you have the staff to put this stuff on your website, it's not much harder to put that in an email. But anyways, guys, we are going down a huge sidetrack here. So we've gotten through the Arizona Administrative Code and the ARS. Now, the most confusing part, we know the laws that come from the state of Arizona, but what about the laws that come from these realtor associations or other associations of real estate out there? How in the world are they legally allowed to enforce anything on us? How are they allowed to fine us? How are they allowed to revoke our MLS access if we really screw up? How in the world does this make any kind of sense, Jeff?
Okay, so once again, just to reiterate, and I think you all understand, but remember, if you're a licensee only, it's only the ARS and the AAC that we need to abide by.
And the substantive policy statements.
And the SPSs. But if you decide to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and remember, you are volunteering with money, but on your own accord to join the largest trade organization in the United States called the National Association of Realtors, wearing and flying your blue flag. So I want to make sure that you understand you do not need to be a Realtor member to be a licensee and to sell real estate in Arizona. Okay, so now that you understand that, you've joined NAR, you're a Realtor member that is trademarked, and then they have different rules, and some of the rules are going to be the number one, biggest one that we all know is going to be the 17 articles of the Code of Ethics.
Except most of us don't know there's 17 articles.
Which they don't, because I ask that. I say, hey, by the way, how many articles are there in the Code of Ethics? And I have to tell you, very, very, very few people know. And I'm like,
what's the most common answer that you've seen over the last couple of years?
You mean
as far as like what number of articles do people usually say?
28, 50, 2. There's no rhyme or reason. There's no like, oh yeah, people make a mistake and they say that it's 10. No, it's all over the board.
I think the most common answer that I've seen in the last couple of years of me doing this is people say there's 35 articles specifically.
Where are they getting 35?
I have no idea. And I know I'm going on a rabbit trail again, but I have to say this. When we're talking about the Code of Ethics that we're supposed to abide by as realtors, how can we tell people that we're abiding by the Code of Ethics if, number one, we don't know what the Code of Ethics are, and number two, we don't know how many different codes there are. Now, I'm not even going to dive into the different standards of practice, because even I don't have the number of standards of practice memorized. But the thing that really throws people off is when you ask them how many different sections there are to the Code of Ethics, which, by the way, there's only 3 of them. But anyways, getting back on track, how in the world are these rules enforced?
Okay, so let's go over this again. So we have the Code of Ethics, but remember, that's only one of the things from NAR, right? People don't realize that basically they also create another set of rules, and that's for the MLSs. So you have to remember, there's about 530 plus or minus MLSs across the United States. Now, most of these are Realtor owned, which means that they need to also abide by another set of rules that comes from NAR, and these are going to be NAR MLS rules. And these are going to be rules that pretty much should have the same number no matter which MLS you go to, but these are going to be things like, oh my gosh, let's see.
Like Rule 8.0, the clear cooperation policy.
8.0 is a great example. Clear cooperation, which by the way might be going away. Okay, but so you have to remember, and by the way, if you don't know what clear cooperation is, please go Google it, okay?
Or come take our class.
Or come take our class, even better. And then you don't have to Google it, right? Dr. Google. But these are going to be rules that pretty much are throughout. So in other words, let's take, for example, 8.23, okay? So you can't put any sort of broker logo or advertise yourself within the MLS on the MLS photos. And remember, the only thing that changes from MLS to MLS is the finable offense. So for example, ARMLS, it happens to be $200 if you do that. In other MLSs, it's $25. It could be $2,000, right? Everybody is just a little bit different with the actual amount of fines. So NAR doesn't dictate the fines, they dictate the MLS rules, and then the fines are going to be up to the local MLS. It's the same thing when you break a code of ethics and somebody turns you in and you get in trouble for that. That's going to be up to the local association and your set of peers that determine what the offense is. So there's no set finable offense on that. It's going to be up to the local MLS. So the rules are set, the fines are not.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So here's a question that just popped into my head. You've got 500 some odd MLSs across the country, and if they are realtor owned, let's say for example they create their own set of rules, the NAR has their own set of rules, which set of rules gets the priority?
So NAR is always going to get priority. Okay, theirs is going to be the main rules up there, and then if there are local, like hyper local rules, that's going to be up to each MLS.
Okay.
So I'm going to recommend when you join your local MLS, or remember there's MLS, when I say MLS of choice, I'm not talking about a certain association. I'm talking about it's actually called that you don't have to join your local MLS, what is closest to you in proximity. You can join any MLS you want. So make sure that when you join your MLS, you download their set of rules from the website, most likely, because that's going to be super important. And then once again, it will also show you what those actual fines are.
Yeah. And to be fair, actually, a great example of this is Armless here in Maricopa County and around the rest of the state now. Armless does actually provide kind of a training course on their rules, and they actually have a pretty interesting quiz that people can do to test their knowledge of these rules.
Correct, and that those quizzes are really good. MLS 8.0 is a great example. Clear cooperation. There's a whole thing on it. There's 10 questions, and I have to tell you, I mean, the first time I took it, I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit it, but I think I got like 4 or 5 wrong because they're pretty tricky. Like, okay, what happens? And anyways, go take the quiz on their website. But you're right, they have a great thing there. So, okay. So once again, we've established you're with NAR and you belong to ARMLS. And quick side note, everybody, I want to remind you, since 1994, ARMLS, if you're part of us, does not require you to be an NAR member to join our local MLS. Just a quick side note I want to remind you of that.
But you've got to be one of those MLS choice members.
Correct.
From the local associations.
Correct. Or every one of our local associations here, which would be We Serve, Phoenix Realtors, and Scottsdale Realtors, has had that path called MLS Only Path do that since 1994. The only thing, and we discussed this in one of our other podcasts, one of the things that Phoenix Realtors did is, they've always had that. They lower the fee, and then they also have their own set of forms. But I'm digressing. Go back to our other podcasts there. Okay,
so we've kind of made our way through the Arizona revised statutes and through the Code of Ethics and the Arizona Administrative Code, not in that order. But let me ask you this question. If I violate one of the letter sections of R428-1101, say, for example, I am sitting on a beach in Tahiti sipping my margarita, and I intentionally delay writing a contract for my buyer, and my buyer doesn't wind up getting that house because I was too busy sipping my margarita and didn't have somebody else in place to write the offer for me, number one, could I get in trouble for that? Number two, what would it look like for me to get in trouble? And I think the biggest question of that whole thing is who in the world is going to be enforcing that?
Yeah, all great questions. So now you are backing up a little bit, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, just to make sure. So
just a question that popped into my head.
Yeah, all good. So Okay, so in that case, purposely delaying the offering or anything that deals with an offer, whether you're the listing agent or the buyer's agent, right, to do it expeditiously, that would be under R428-1101. And so in that, basically, what would happen is that somebody would have to turn you in, okay? That can be either another licensee, or it could be a member of the public. So that could be anybody.
Which is every person on the face of the earth.
Which means everybody on the face of the earth. So if they were to do that, what would happen is that it would go to Arizona Department of Real Estate, and they would determine if you truly did break the rule, and if you did, they will go ahead and they will determine the fine structure within ADRE. So there's no court of your peers or anything like that. This is 100% ADRE deciding the fines. Okay. Now, so did that answer your question there? Okay, so we're going to go there. Okay.
So you were about to dive into something here.
Yeah, so basically the code of ethics, right? So what happens is that this can also, you can get in trouble from either a fellow realtor, licensee, or of course the general public, right?
Wait, so if I'm a licensee and not a member of a realtor association, how can I turn somebody in for an ethics violation?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So here's the thing. Remember, anybody can turn somebody in if you're a realtor, right? If you're a realtor member, anybody can turn you in, whether it be a licensee or the public.
Okay.
Okay, so what you need to understand is that you need to find out which board they belong to. Okay, so once again, let's talk about here in Arizona. I'm going to go on a bigger picture, right? So
and
here,
a board is a local realtor association.
Yep. So let's talk about this, right? There's 14 local associations here in Arizona, and there used to be 10 MLSs. Now there's 9 because SVVAR, Sedona Verde Valley Association of Realtors, actually joined ARMLS, so went from 10 to 9. So once again, we have 14 local associations. We have 9 MLSs, but nothing to do with the, at least what I'm talking about, nothing to do with the MLS. Those are the MLS rules. And then we got our Code of Ethics, 17 articles, and that has to do with the local association.
Okay.
Okay, so the local association in of itself does not actually have rules. They actually are there to enforce the rules.
Got it.
Okay. So NAR has the rules. Local association doesn't have its own rules, but they're there to enforce it. So in other words, if I get brought up on charges of NAR Article 15 because I bashed another realtor, right? So what happens is that somebody would look me up, they would find out which board, local board I belong to, and then they would turn me into my local board, not their local board. Okay, now, if it's a public, obviously they don't have a board, so obviously it would come to me regardless. So remember, you always go after which board they, the offender, belongs to, not
And
which board you belong to.
How can I find that out?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways. So if you go into Flex MLS and you look up the actual participant, right, the MLS participant, and actually in there it will tell you exactly which board they belong to.
Okay.
Once again, right here in Maricopa County, it would either be Phoenix, Scottsdale, or We Serve.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense.
Okay. So once they do that, they would turn you in. Most of the local hold on, let me rephrase that. The 3 local associations here in Maricopa County, they pretty much, instead of making their own court system, for a lack of better words, they've given it to our state association. So it's really Arizona Realtors, previously known as Arizona Association of Realtors, and what they did is they have their court that basically takes care of We Serve, Phoenix, and Scottsdale. So you're really going, but technically you would really go to local association, but they've given that authority and power over to our state association. So you're going to get...
We don't want to deal with it. You can have that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's too much work. Here you go. So they have their own, people who have gone through training and are registered there. And so they're allowed to do that. And they're really quick, I have to tell you. Like, once you turn it in, I'm not joking, like the next day, you're pretty much going to get an email that says, oh, we found them yes, we agree they're guilty or they're not guilty, and whether they move forward or not. Now, the actual case, might not happen right away. It's going to take maybe a month or so, but the actual, whether they're guilty or not, it happens pretty gosh darn quick.
So basically what they're going to do is they're going to review the complaint
Correct.
and try and pull all the details out of there they can.
Correct.
And generally speaking, two parts to this question. Usually, whenever somebody sends in a complaint, usually they have to make reference to whatever article the complainant thinks they violated, right? And then additionally to that, if somebody with the Realtor Association reviews that complaint and says, oh, the complainant thinks that they violated Article 1 and Article 12, but I also see violations of Article 14 and 15, for example, can they also tack on violations of those additional articles?
Yeah, it's a good question. The answer is no. The violations have to come from, once again, somebody else, right? And when they do that, and even if they did find it, right, I mean, the state association, they look at it like, oh my gosh, but they also violated, they're not going to be able to tack it on because it can't come from them. It has to come from, once again, member of the public, which includes other licensed seasoned realtors.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah, which actually remind me to ask that same question when we get into our local MLS, because I'll tell you what happens there as well.
All right.
Okay, so basically, they're going to go ahead and they're going to come up with a tribunal of your fellow realtors, and basically they're going to try you in that local court system. I know I'm using the wrong words, but just so that everybody understands what it is, but it's your local.
You gotta put it in layman terms.
Yeah, layman's terms. So, but it's going to be a local tribunal, and what's going to happen is that they're going to hear your case of the complainant, right, and the complainant and the defendant, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And anyways, once they do that, then they're going to determine, if they're wrong, and if they did something against the code of ethics, and whatever article that you're telling them that they broke. Now, you mentioned before, and I want to make sure that you understand that you can only bring up charges on the actual code of ethics. You cannot bring it up on the actual individual standards of practice, right?
Okay.
So, in other words, let's say it's Article 1, and it's 1.6 or 7 or whatever. You don't bring up on charges that it's on the article alone. Okay.
So you're saying I can't write a complaint on one of the standards of practice?
Correct. Correct.
So what if I find somebody in violation of not necessarily Article 1 as a whole, but Standard Practice 1-1 specifically? How in the world would I write a complaint about that?
Yeah. You would reference that, and you could reference it, but basically it would be against or for Article 1, and that's what it says in there, okay? And you could be brought up on multiple articles, because I've seen that one before.
Is it possible to violate every article in the Code of Ethics at the same time?
It's possible. I can't imagine. I know I've never seen that in my life, and I never will see that in my life. I mean, you have to do something like crazy out there. Now, I have seen somebody who was brought up on 5 different articles. I've seen that one.
That's a pretty difficult achievement to get to right there.
That's a serious, difficult achievement to get to, but it has happened. Every one of them, you need to be like breaking every rule in the book. So, yeah.
Yep, I would agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we have the Code of Ethics, we understand that. Our local association takes care of it, right? You get fined at a local level, but remember, they still don't disclose the names. You just get tallied up, and then at the end of the year, they come up with a sheet, and it goes, how many people violated Article 1 and Article 2 and so forth and so on to Article 17.
Okay. I think it would be a great transparency thing for the general public if they would start releasing those names.
It would.
So I know that ADRE releases it, but do you think maybe the Realtor Associations don't release it because we're supposed to be more ethical than most real estate licensees? Or why do you think the reasoning is they don't release the names of the people who died throughout the course of the year?
You know, honestly, truthfully, I don't know. I really, really don't know. I've asked this question to, and we haven't talked about it yet, but the local MLS. And I used to, once again, be on the board, and I've asked, like, why don't we release the names? And like, oh, we never have before. And I'm like, well, that's not a reason. And actually, I was told if the board of directors voted on it, then you can do it. And I'm like, I'm all in favor for that one. But honestly,
let's have some fun with this.
Let's have some fun. It's a great question. I don't know the answer. Like, I really don't know the answer to that one.
I don't know. It just, to me personally, I look at that and it seems kind of like accountability is taking a little bit of a shot in the foot.
Agreed. And like I said, it never hurts to shame, and I'm not trying to say this in a negative way, but you know what? I mean, shame means somebody actually goes a long ways, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be, everybody knows, my fellow peers, my fellow realtors, my fellow licensees know that I did this or that. So I don't know.
I wouldn't be concerned about my fellow licensees. I'd be a lot more concerned about my clients.
Yeah, and the clients, right, and looking at it. 100%. Great point. Great point.
So
Okay.
now breaking into the MLSs and things like that, it actually also brings up another interesting thing that you and I don't really reference very much in our classes, just popped into my head. What about the rules that come from HUD? All the different fair housing rules that we get, where in the world do these come into play, especially being that the NAR has their own set of fair housing rules within the Code of Ethics?
Wow, you're trying to stump me today, aren't you? So I'm going to tell you an interesting fact that most people don't know. Okay.
All right.
Let's talk about the main thing that comes out of HUD, and that's going to be fair housing, right? I would say for us, that would be the main point. There's other things as well, obviously, but I think that would be the main thing that we would need to be concerned about is the fair housing aspect of it that comes out from HUD. I'm going to give you a quick fact, and this is kind of interesting. Who do you think in the state of Arizona actually dictates and demands that we use the fair housing logo or logo type when we market a property to the public? Do you think, and I'm even giving you multiple choice, you think it would be HUD, kind of the obvious one, right? Oops. Would it be NAR? Would it be ADRE? Would it be ARMLS or your local MLS? Would it be your local association? Or would it be the state association or other? Like, all these would be the obvious things, but where do you think it actually says here in Arizona that you must use the fair housing logo or logo type?
You know, I know for a fact in the state of Arizona it does not come from HUD.
Correct.
But I want to say I've seen something about it in the Arizona Administrative Code, but I'm not 100% sure who exactly enforces the equal housing logo. And that's sad because I'm an instructor. I should know this.
All good. We're in a safe space, I think, right? Okay.
The commissioner's not sitting at the table across the way, so
correct.
I think we're good.
Hey, Susan, I think she's right behind us. So I want to remind you that, are you ready for this one? It actually doesn't come from HUD, believe it or not. It doesn't come from anywhere in the AAC or the ARS or anything from NAR. Ready for this one?
Who enforces this one?
I know. This one is actually brought out by the Arizona Attorney General's office.
That's right.
Is that the craziest thing ever? Like, you would think that it would come out from HUD, the logical choice, right? And it would come out from NAR and all this other stuff. And don't take that the wrong way, everybody. Like, NAR, we're super serious about fair housing, which, quick side note, right?
We absolutely should be.
Right. But this year, I want to remind you, 2025 and moving forward, so we have to take the Code of Ethics triennially every 3 years, so 25, 26, 27, the end of 2027. But we also have something brand new, that's the fair housing from NAR as well. I'm not talking about the fair housing for the 3 hours that we have to take here in Arizona from ADRE, but it's fair housing from NAR. Now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a course that's going to combine the two, so you can do 1 3-hour fair housing and it will satisfy your ADRE plus your NAR credits. But anyways, I want to make sure that you understand from this year, you do have to get fair housing, okay? But the actual logo and logo type actually comes from the Attorney General's office.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the logo that we're using was not created by HUD, was it? Or was it?
Yeah, okay. So it was created by HUD and the 7 protected classes, right?
Yeah.
And that in of itself, because
Oh,
remember...
wait, no, HUD's got 9 protected classes.
No, HUD has 7.
No, the Code of Ethics has 7, HUD has 9. They also introduced marital status and sexual orientation to their protected classes.
They did, but that's in sex. So let's make sure that we're talking on the same page, okay?
Yep.
So the actual fair housing logo comes from HUD. Okay. The fact that you have to use it to market as a licensee comes from the Arizona Attorney General's office. Okay.
All right.
Now, let's talk about this again. HUD has 7 protected classes. Okay. Then NAR came out with 2 extra protected classes, which is sexual identity and gender identity and sexual orientation. Yeah, I got those mixed up. So, sexual orientation, gender identity. Now, to be fair to what you just said, there's still 7 within HUD, but in the first one, which is sex, HUD has included that it's going to be sexual. Okay, so they still have 7, but then there's 2 extra ones, but they're already included in there. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so 7 and 2, so there's 9 total, but those 2 extra also are included in sex from HUD. So really, NAR doesn't really need to go over the extra 2 because they're already included in there as of fairly recently, right? Okay, so because of that, the answer is, if you ever go to our fair housing class, the answer is there's 7 from HUD, 2 from NAR, but those 2 are really in the HUD.
Okay. Makes perfect sense.
Okay, good. So now that we understand that, Attorney General's office, you already got that one, and then I forgot your other question. But I guess we go to MLS if not.
Yeah, I got scrolled there as well.
Yeah,
so let's jump into the MLS. Just in the interest of time, let's definitely
got it. Okay, so remember, remember that these rules that each MLS has to follow, Realtor-owned MLS has to follow, which, by the way, ARMLS is a Realtor-owned MLS, from the 3 shareholders, which are going to be We Serve, Phoenix, and Scottsdale, back from 1984 or 82. Gosh darn it, I used to know that off the top of my head.
Jeff has officially achieved nerd status.
Yes, nerd status, right. So anyways, so what happened is that we need to abide by those rules. Now, once again, those rules come from NAR, the majority of them. The majority already have a number attached to it, like 8.0, 8.23, and so forth. 8.25 is a new one that shows our showing agreement that we have to have that. But then again, each fine structure is going to be based on each of the MLSs. Once again, if you put in a commission, although we call it compensation, but if you put any number mentioning compensation or commission, for example,
or even the term compensation or commission.
Correct. And by the way, the term can even be used in a non-derogatory way. Let me give you an example. I read over this, and if you say, by the way, there's an application fee for this rental of $350. And if you put in there, because it's happened, the $350 is not a commission or compensation. Somebody actually put that in there. And guess what? They got in trouble.
Which is actually mind-blowing, because you would think that would be, like, I know there's breaking the rule, there's complying with the rule. You would think this would be the opposite side.
Correct. But remember, even though they're really not doing anything wrong, because they're saying this is not a commission or compensation, but the fact that you just use that word alone, guess what? $500 fine.
I mean, usually these days, as of August of last year, anytime you put anytime you have anything that mentions compensation or commissions, usually has to be 2 clicks away from the MLS is the general rule.
2 clicks away.
And you can pretty much put it anywhere. Like you can put it on your social media pages or anything, as long as it's at least 2 clicks away from
Correct.
the MLS.
Correct.
Or not even clickable from the MLS. That'd
correct.
be
As
better.
long as it's not clickable, and remember, don't mention bananas and don't mention apples because that's also a finable offense. But here it's $500. Guess how much it is in different MLSs in California?
Oh gosh, knowing how California is, I'm going to take a shot in the dark and say at least $2,000.
Wow, that's pretty good. It is. It's $2,000.
Oh, what a shot.
Yeah, yay, Jake. So I want to let you know they're super serious about this rule because of obviously the class action lawsuits that we are involved in. So I just want to remind you that these things are real and make sure you don't do that. So once again, most of these rules come from NAR, but the actual amounts that are charged is going to be based on each MLS, which, by the way, please go into the rules of your local MLS and just find out. Because once again, let's talk about what we first talked about. Ready? MLS 8.0, $500 a day. Remember, if you if you market a property to the public, and that means a sign in the front yard, and not putting on MLS, remember, there's lots of rules around that.
You have 1 business day to get it in the MLS.
Correct. One business day, not 24 hours. It's 1 business day. So remember, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and if MLK Day was yesterday, so in other words, that would be the 3rd day. And I also want to remind you that if you and remember, coming soon would actually satisfy that requirement. Okay. So, and there's other things as well.
And with coming soon, you've got, 30 days to market in the MLS before you have to go active?
And then it automatically goes active whether you like it or not. So that's $500 a day. So if you market a property and you don't put it in MLS for 7 days, well, guess what? It's a $3,500 fine, right? I mean, it's pretty gosh darn expensive. So you need to look at these rules. By the way, that $15,000 fine that I was talking about, if I, or anybody, right, if you loan out your lockbox key, and let me explain to you what I mean by that. Not your Supra blue lockbox that you put on the door, the bib, or whatever. I'm talking about my actual key. So I give you my phone.
It's like you give somebody your phone or the login to the app.
Correct. And if I do that, I'm like, hey Jeff, I left my phone at home. I need to show this. Here you go. And if you do that, even though they're on the same team as you, we both work for ABC Realty. I want to let you know, up to a $15,000 fine.
So I can't just give my unlicensed assistant or my showing agent access to my Supra account.
Don't do that. Okay. Well, you can, but then be prepared to,
Yeah, if you get caught. That's a major thing to note about not only these rules, but every other rules. I'm not going to be that guy, but the rules really only hurt you if you get caught. Not to say you should go breaking them, but they only hurt you if they get caught.
Well, you would be surprised because let me tell you something. I sit on the little court out there, right? And there's a lot of violations of that. A lot of violations. And by the way, the listing agent, there's a good chance they will turn you in, because what happens is that you're surprising people, right? I mean, and how do I know? There might be little kids that are by themselves. I don't know. Somebody's taking a shower. Somebody has a gun, right? And they're not expecting anybody. Well, guess what?
Oh gosh.
Forget about a fine, right? Because it's happened.
You might
before.
be getting a medical bill at the end of the day.
You might be getting a medical bill. So I'm telling you, we take safety seriously, and violating that is a no-no, everybody. So I just want to let you know that one. Okay.
So in our last couple of minutes, I do want to bring up one other thing. The individual brokerages, arguably one of the lowest positions on the totem pole of the different, the pecking order that we have of real estate rules. Where in the world do brokerage policy and procedure manuals fit into this? And is there really anything that a policy and procedure manual can tighten up on that the other state and NAR rules don't really tighten up on? Yeah,
so it's a good question. So you always need to look at your broker policy manual, and some of them is, and this is a great one that I'm just thinking off the top of my head. So let's talk about limited representation or dual agency. Okay, it's legal in Arizona. It's not legal in every state, but here in Arizona it is. There are some brokers out there who say, no way, we do not want dual agency in our brokerage. And they could say, so it's not allowed. And, I'm kind of always wondering about that, because you have to remember, we're both with ABC Realty, and whether I know you or not doesn't even make a difference. But remember, if you, as a buyer's agent, show my listing, obviously I'm the listing agent, and we're in the same brokerage, you have to remember that's considered dual agency.
And that is a good thing to point out, because dual agency doesn't necessarily mean that I'm representing the buyer and the seller in the transaction.
Correct.
It's anybody who's under the same designated broker at the same brokerage, because really when people hire you, you learn this in the agency law CE class, when they hire you, they're hiring your designated broker, and your designated broker is hiring you to act as the sales agent in that transaction.
You know what, a lot of people still don't understand this, and as Jake just explained to you, remember, those buyers are not yours. Those sellers are not yours. They are owned by the
designated broker.
By the DB, everybody. So you need to understand that. And if the DB says, hey, by the way, you're on that, Caribbean beach drinking your margarita and he didn't kill anybody, they can literally say, hey, by the way, we're taking away your listing, we're taking away your buyer, and we're just going to sign it to somebody else because you're not here.
Yeah, they can absolutely do that. But anyways, back to the policy and procedure manual. Do you really feel like, never mind, I'll let you answer the question. Where do you think this fits within all the different rules out there? Do you think it's the lowest of the low, and I know we shouldn't ignore it, but how important is that P&P manual really at the end of the day?
Well, you have to remember, the manual always has to take everything we just discussed as first and foremost, right? So in other words, you can't have something in your manual that goes against those NAR policies, the AAC policy, all that other stuff we just discussed. It can't go against that. So that's going to be important. And by the way, that actually got us in trouble, not to go down this route, but you have to remember, in Gary Keller's manual, right? And by the way, KW, great brokerage, all that other stuff. But he actually talked about commission and what our standard commission is and stuff like that. That got us in a deep doo-doo, and they brought that up in court. They go, here, this is from your page of the manual that you need to go ahead and do that. And by the way,
here's your price fixing charges, folks.
and that's exactly what happens. So I want to make sure that you understand how important these things are, because they can be brought up in court, which it was. That's one of the reasons why we lost the case. Other reasons, but that's at least one of them.
Okay, makes perfect sense. Okay. So in closing, Jeff, do you have anything else that you want to add to this particular episode?
I think that we pretty much discussed who does what rules are going to be broken, if they are. Here's what I want to tell you as a last thing. Please go look at this. Take our classes, everybody. Who does what? Go, Dr. Google it, Dr. Bing it, whatever you want, whatever search engine. But please go look this up, because I'm telling you, people call me and they're like, Jeff, I just got a $2,000 fine. I can't believe it.
Can they really do this? Yeah.
Yeah, and the answer is yes, and yes, because you agreed to it when you joined NAR, when you have your license, so yes, the answer is yes.
I think the other thing that a lot of people ask pretty commonly is, when these fines come along, is there any way I can get out of paying this money? And the answer a lot of the times is probably going to be no.
Well, kind of, because you always get your defense, okay? And that's with almost all of them. Even ADRE, although ADRE is a little bit different, a little bit trickier, but the other ones, they do give you the ability to go ahead and fight it. Sometimes, actually most of the time, you're going to have to pay money and to fight it. And once you do that, if you're totally in the clear, a lot of times the tribunals, they'll actually possibly give you that money back as well. So, yeah.
Well, we'll do another episode on how to fight your fines and charges and stuff. We'll save that for down the road. Yeah. But anyways, guys, with that, I do want to say thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Tech 4 podcast. It's been absolutely great having you guys, and we look forward to having you for our future episodes and for continuing education classes as well. We'll see you all in the next episode.
See you later.